Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells, and I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today I'm going to talk about a horror game, sort of, which is Vampire the Masquerade. I've reviewed this before, and I've reviewed one of the campaigns. Today I'm going to talk about one of their source books for the Camarilla. Now, if you watched my review of the core book, I said Camarilla the entire time. And this is especially embarrassing to me because I used to live in Mexico and I'm fluent in Spanish. Never occurred to me that that was a Spanish word. I thought it was just some made up word. But actually, camarilla is a word that means a small group that's like in charge of something. It's kind of like a Spanish word for cabal or something like that. And I learned this by watching the LA by Night Vampire the Masquerade actual play campaign on YouTube, where they pronounce it correctly because it's run by one of the game designers. Anyway, Camarilla. So, this book, Camarilla, I don't have a PDF, so we're just going to be looking at the book today. This one and its companion book, Anarch, are source books about the two major vampire organizations in the world of Vampire the Masquerade. Camarilla is the one that controls everything. They're like the ones who came up with the idea of the masquerade, which is a concerted effort to hide the existence of vampires and the truth of the supernatural from the rest of the world. They are the kind of vampires who are old school, control everything, gain incredible power and wealth and everything else over hundreds or thousands of years, and they are kind of, that's who the Camarilla is. The other group, the Anarch, as you can guess from the name, they oppose that idea and they just want to be free. They want to be able to do whatever they want. They don't want to be under the thumb of these other people. Most of them also support the masquerade, but they have different methods of doing that. Anyway, what is really unique about these two books, and we'll be looking at Anarch later in the year, what's unique about them is that with a couple of minor exceptions, they don't include any rules information. They are all narrative. They are all fluff, quote unquote, and most of it is written as in-world documents. And so a lot of this is journal entries. Some of it is letters. One of them that I thought was really clever was a police report. And so it's not that they are trying to give you specific rules that you can use to play your games, because the basic layout is the same thing. What they're trying to do in this book is teach you what the Camarilla is and how they work, and it does that through what is essentially a short story collection. And it's really kind of interesting. Now, that said, it is all in-world, so it's not like you're going to crack this open and read a short story. What you're going to read are a bunch of first-person accounts of various things that have happened. So, for example, let's open it up. The very first thing in here, after the table of contents, is this letter, introduction, My Dear Child. And then it is a letter from a vampire, a super powerful vampire, to a new vampire that he or she has, I can't remember which one it is, I think this is a she. Anyway, a new vampire that she has created. And it's been several years, and she's just kind of talking about it, saying, this is what I did. This is why I did what I did. You don't understand yet how I am raising you, so to speak. But there are important reasons why I'm doing so. And, in the course of that, she talks about what it's like to be in the Camarilla and why the Camarilla does what it's doing. Anyway, it's really interesting. And the entire book is like that. Let me find the police report. Some of these are like texts that they send to each other. Some of these are just, essays that someone has written to pass around through what I can only assume is like some kind of underground vampire zine. Lots of different articles that they have written. Now I can't find this stupid police report. Anyway, Here it is. It's a police report. And I mean, basically, what they're trying to say here, this is, a one-page short story, sort of, kind of, epistolary, that is trying to say, look at the incredible power that vampires possess. And the way that it gets that message across is a police report of an incident that happened in a pizza parlor, an Italian restaurant, where somebody saw, a bunch of people in a restaurant just standing there doing nothing for a very long time, and was concerned that something was going to happen, something had happened, called, and as soon as the phone rang, everyone in the restaurant just kind of woke up and looked around and had no memory of what had happened, except for two people who remember that they had been robbed and then told to forget. And, there's an implication that those two people who remembered that there might be something strange going on with them. Anyway, it's a really neat demonstration of vampire power, but it's done, through the means of this document. The whole thing is like that, and I think it's really cool. And they go through a lot of vampire history. If you want to know, the backstory of the vampire world, this is an incredible book. It's got a huge chapter on the Gehenna War. It's got a huge chapter on the Second Inquisition, which is what's happening currently and what started, I think, in the 90s or the early 2000s, about the world kind of figured out. They saw some key people saw past the Masquerade, realized there were vampires, and started this massive campaign of destruction against them, and that's the Second Inquisition. So there's a lot of information about that. Now, it is important to note. Let's split this into two notes. First of all, this is a work of horror. In fact, on the table of contents, I'm going to read this to you. They've got warnings all through the core book. They repeat a lot of those warnings here. It says, this is a work of speculative horror fiction set in a dark reflection of our own world. Thus, it contains graphic depictions of sex, blood drinking, drugs, violence, abuse, political oppression, coercion, occultism, heresy, and many other potentially upsetting themes. Recommended for mature readers and players. For advice on considerate play and how to handle sensitive themes in tabletop role-playing games, see the section Considerate Play in the PDF version of the Vampire the Masquerade rulebook. So, there is that. And this book doesn't shy away from a lot of those things. One of the things that, in hindsight, should not have surprised me, but kind of did, is it has a massive section on how vampires interact with real-world religions. And again, this is not rules information. This is all just kind of narrative storytelling. So there's a big section that talks about Christianity, talks about Judaism, talks about Islam. There's a pretty significant section, actually, that talks about Islam. One of the few chunks of new rules information is that the book provides a brand new clan that wasn't in the core book called Banu Hakim, which is a Muslim vampire clan. And so, on one hand, personally, I think this is good information to include in the book, right? Because if the vampires exist in our world, they are going to interact with religion in some way. On the other hand, there are absolutely going to be players out there who are like, nope, that's too much. I don't want to know about the vampiric version of my faith. I don't want to know, I don't want to hear these kind of speculative secret history things where, this council that happened 1,000 years ago was actually influenced by vampires in some way. There's that kind of stuff, and if that bothers you, then that bothers you, and this is not the game for you. And I appreciate that the game makers are very upfront about saying this game is not for everybody. It should be played, only by people who are comfortable with the themes in it. And, as with all role-playing games, if there's something that you don't like, but you do like everything else, just cut out the thing you don't like. It's your game and you can do whatever you want. The other thing that I wanted to mention, though, is that this book, just like the entire line of Vampire the Masquerade, has been plagued with controversy. And in fact, when the first edition of the Camarilla book came out, there was a section in there on Chechnya and the kind of pogrom against gay people in Chechnya, and that has been taken out. Even the publisher agreed, yeah, we went too far on that one. It's one thing to say, hey, look, there are, vampires who do X kind of thing. It's another thing entirely to take an actual, real world, modern day tragedy, massacre, and then put it into your game for entertainment purposes. And so, to their credit, they've taken a lot of that out. What I have here is the second printing that doesn't have that information in it. And they have kind of gone out of their way to correct the mistakes that they made in the first printing. And I think that that's really good. What is left is a book that, while still very dark, I think is more respectful of a lot of the cultures and things and problems that they had, been dealing with, and I think they've done a good job with it. Anyway, your mileage may vary, and even me. Now I'm ruined my entire career by saying, hey, this problematic thing is slightly less problematic now. One of the sections in here, chapter, what is this? I don't know. They don't number the chapters. There's a chapter called The Court, which describes, again, all through in-world letters and documents and stuff, what a vampire court is like and how vampire governance works, and then runs down all of the major cities in the world. And you only get 3 or 4 paragraphs each. But for example, what is it like in Berlin? What is it like in Prague? What is it like in Chicago? What is it like in Vienna? There are some that I wish were included. There's no mention, for example, of New York or of Los Angeles, and I would love to know those. Given what I've just said about religion in this book, I would genuinely love to know the vampiric version of my own home city, Salt Lake City, Utah, but they don't even get into that. Anyway, after it talks about all of those cities, then it talks about the main kindred clans, the vampire clans that are aligned with the Camarilla, which are, of course, Ventru. Ventru is the we are in charge of everything clan. That's their defining characteristic. They created the Camarilla. Second is Toreador, which is like the we are super good looking and sexy and controlling in that way clan. Then there's Tremere, which is like the wizard magic clan, and the Malkavians, which is the mental illness clan, for lack of a better word. And one of the things that I really like about this book, one of the things that really sold me on it personally, is because they are describing Malkavian through a lot of first-person stuff, it kind of justified the Malkavians for me in a way that the core book didn't. I have a really close connection with mental health and mental illness, a lot of my family members, a lot of things that I do personally. And so I wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of a clan that's like, we're the crazy people. But this book kind of showed me why that is. And, your mileage may vary, but for me, the descriptions they gave of kind of how this clan came to be and how this clan maintains itself and propagates itself kind of makes sense. And I really was kind of sold on it by the end. Malkavian is a very important clan in the lore, and this book, sold me on them. So good for that. Then last, of course, Nosferatu is the clan that's like the creepy ones who look like they're dead, that kind of Nosferatu-looking people. And they, their whole section talks about how, yeah, you'd think we should be Anarch, but we're actually Camarilla, and this is why. And it's a really cool story-based description that I really liked. So hooray for them. Anyway, then it talks about the Banu Hakim, which is that new one. And, they have larger identity than just we're the Muslim clan. They have other things going on. They have their own specific identity, their own kind of wants and desires and agenda beyond just their origin as coming from, an Islamic culture, which I really liked. So they're, with all of this stuff, what they're trying to do is present a really round version. And in fact, this is true not just of the Banu Hakim section, but the entire book. A lot of the information in here is contradictory because it is all written as first-person accounts, and therefore they are opinions. And so there's a section, when it talks about the Anarch, and that's the next section that comes after Banu Hakim. It's like, this is how we interact with the other major group of vampires. And some of that is, let me just read you the three major headlines in the Anarch section. It says, "The history of the Anarch movement and why our lost children should remain so." And then the second one is, "Why we must rid ourselves of the Anarch menace." And so some of them want to ignore them. Some of them want to destroy them. Some of the Camarilla want to bring the Anarch back into the fold. And I love those conflicting opinions because there is no single right answer. Not everyone is in exact lockstep with each other. And so having these different, contradictory, varied opinions really, in my opinion, helps flesh out that world even more, which is awesome. Then it talks about the Anarch clans, Gangrel, Bruja, the Caitiff, which are like the unaligned vampires that don't have a clan. It talks about the thin-blooded, which, the Anarch kind of see very differently. For the Camarilla, the thin-blooded, which are like vampires who are so far down in generation, so far removed from the original source of power that they kind of don't really have much power at all. And the Camarilla are like, well, that's, some of them see them as an abomination, some of them see them as an exploitable resource. There's a lot of different ways that the Camarilla treat the thin-blooded. It talks about the Sabbat, although you learn a lot more about Sabbat in the Anarch book. And then last of all, the last few things we get are the kind of nitty-gritty rules, the stuff that the rest of the book doesn't have. So it has lore sheets. Lore sheets are a thing that, let me just show you what they look like, if I can find them. So these are like people you can ally yourself to, is kind of what this is. People and organizations. And if you connect your character to a lore sheet, then you have access to powers, basically, that you can buy with experience and add them to the rest of your powers. So, for example, Carmelita Nilsson is like some kind of Camarilla archaeologist. And if you are connected to her, then you have, all these little powers down here that you can gain and that you can buy with experience, and you can do interesting things with them, which is really interesting. There's Fatima al-Fakadi, who is, I believe she is part of the Banu Hakim, and she was a big deal in the Gehenna War, and she's the super powerful, like, vampire warrior woman, and if you have her as an ally, because through this lore sheet, then you've got access to different powers and things. So those are neat. There's one with pure Ventru lineage, which is like you're a better Ventru than the other Ventru, because lineage is like the most important thing to them. There's a whole thing about the cult of Mithras, which, I talk about the Fall of London campaign book in a previous video, and that's all about the cult of Mithras. And so if you want that as a lore sheet, it's right here. I think they might have it in the campaign book as well. Anyway, last of all, the final thing in the entire book is this thing about institutional conflict. This is a really cool section, and it's only a couple of pages. It's cool because this is the only book, the only game where institutional conflict, A, could exist, and B, could be a minor section. So it's like, if you are going to be doing, major business deals or political actions, if one of your characters is a very powerful politician or diplomat or billionaire, something like that, how do you do that? How do you appropriately model in the game a political conflict or a diplomatic conflict or a business conflict or something like that? And so here you have 2 pages of rules of how to do it. It's not big, but it smooth, and it lets you do these things without getting in the way. As a vampire politician or a vampire who controls a politician, you absolutely could, if you wanted to, build the entire game around that, and then your game becomes about political campaigning and political favors and decisions and things like that. But if you just want to have it as a background element, this gives you really great rules in how to include it and how to model it, and then get on with the business of drinking people's blood. So that, in a very large nutshell, is the Camarilla book. One thing that I want you to notice, by the way, is that the book that I have here is very different from this book that is in the image. Every image I could find has this woman reversed, like she's a reflection of herself. So here we have, her little strap is on this shoulder, whereas in the image here it's on the other shoulder. I don't know why that is, but every single image, even on Modiphius's website, has the cover image reversed, and I don't understand. But it doesn't matter ultimately. The point is that this is a cool book. If you are into Vampire the Masquerade, then this is, I won't say that it is a for sure pickup, because you can 100% play and enjoy the game without it. But if you are the kind of person who likes extra fluffy stuff, if you like reading game fiction, if you like reading, really delving into the lore behind the games you play, this book and its companion book Anarch cannot be beaten. So I will get to the Anarch book later, probably next month. We'll see. It's on my calendar. I don't know. But between now and then, check out Vampire the Masquerade. Check out the Camarilla book. And I apologize for pronouncing it so poorly in my original review. Anyway, I'm Dan Wells. Thank you for joining me. I will see you on my next review.